The smell of smoke clung to me long after the flames were gone. It had worked its way into my hair, into the fibers of my coat, like regret that wouldn't wash out. I'd barely slept, my ears still ringing with the crackle of fire and the distant wail of the fire engine. And now here I was, standing on my daughter Emily's porch at 7:06 a.m., suitcase in one hand, an urn of my mother's ashes in the other, hoping for mercy. I hadn't even called first. I couldn't. The words wouldn't form. What was I supposed to say? Hey, sweetheart. Everything I've ever known turned to ash last night. Can I stay a while? I figured the sight of me alone on her pristine porch would be enough to explain everything. Emily's house looked like one of those glossy pages from a magazine you keep even though you'll never live like that. A pale stone facade, big black front door with a fancy bronze knocker, and potted ferns placed like chess pieces on either side of the steps. I could hear the soft trickle of a water feature somewhere nearby, and birds chirped like they knew they belonged there more than I did. When she opened the door, she didn't gasp, didn't flinch. She didn't ask what happened or why I was standing there looking like a ghost from a fire. She just took one long look at me, at my soot-streaked coat, my eyes red from sleeplessness and smoke, the handle of the urn clutched in my trembling fingers, and said in a voice so calm it felt like a slap, "You can't stay here, Mom. You'll ruin the aesthetic." I don't even remember if I replied. I must have nodded, maybe whispered something. I do remember the sound the door made when it closed behind her. It wasn't loud or angry. It was soft, deliberate, like a punctuation mark at the end of a very cruel sentence. And that sound stayed with me the rest of the night. I checked into the Oakview Inn just off the highway, a squat building with flickering neon and a front desk clerk who didn't look up from his crossword. The room smelled like wet carpet and broken dreams. The mirror was too cracked to reflect me properly. Maybe that was a mercy. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the phone, willing it to ring, willing some miracle of human kindness to call me back to myself. I raised Emily alone. Her father left when she was 10, right after we put down the deposit on a house he never helped pay for. He took the Buick and left me with a mortgage, a daughter, and a broken-down dryer. I worked 2 jobs, days at the diner and nights sewing hems at a tailor shop just to keep the lights on. I remember boiling hot dogs in an old kettle and pretending it was a treat. I never remarried, never even dated. I didn't have the time, and I didn't want to bring another man into Emily's life unless I knew he was worth it. None ever were. Emily was bright, sharp, always reading, always climbing. She got straight A's, earned a scholarship, and became a nutritionist. She married a plastic surgeon named Martin, who had teeth too white and a handshake too soft. They moved to Charleston into that perfect house. Emily wore white cardigans and drove a hybrid SUV. Every inch of her life looked like a Pinterest board. And with each step she took toward that shiny new life, it felt like she was stepping further away from me. But I never thought she'd slam a door in my face when I had nowhere else to go. At the motel, I didn't cry right away. I'm not a crier. Not when I lost my job at the tailor shop. Not when I buried my sister Elaine and sat alone at the cemetery while everyone else found an excuse not to come. But that night, I cried until my throat felt like it would split open. Not just because of the fire, not even because of Emily's words, but because I finally saw myself the way she must have. A relic, an embarrassment, a smudge on the glass of her perfect life. The next morning, I walked with no real plan. My feet took me to Oakwood Terrace, to the old neighborhood where Emily and I lived back when things were simple. Our house had been a 2-bedroom clapboard with a sagging porch and a chain-link fence. It wasn't much, but it was ours. We had a peach tree that never bore fruit, a creaky swing set I found at a yard sale, and a backyard full of dandelions. Emily used to call them wish flowers. That's where I saw Velma. She was still there, sitting on the same porch, shelling peas into a metal bowl like time had paused just for her. She looked up, squinted, and then that wild, wonderful laugh of hers echoed down the block. "Maggie Walker, you look like you've seen a ghost." I didn't tell her everything, just enough to let her know I was staying at the Oakview Inn, just enough to see the worry rise in her eyes. She didn't push. She never did. But she did say this. The same way she always said things that stuck in your gut like, I fishhook. You still got fight in you, Maggie. You just forgot how to throw a punch. That night, I sat in that stale motel room, notebook in my lap. It was the one I kept tucked away in my purse, where I'd scribbled savings, investments, little financial secrets I never told anyone about. Old bonds, CDs from 20 years ago, sewing money, birthday cash I tucked away instead of spending. I added it all up. It wasn't enough for revenge, but it was enough for something better. 2 weeks later, I bought a house. A big, Southern-style one with white columns and a porch that wrapped around like an embrace. It had marsh views and creaky shutters and the kind of gravel driveway that sounded like memory. I bought it in cash. No mortgage. No strings. Years ago, Emily had circled a picture of a house just like it in a Southern Living magazine and said, "One day I'm going to live there." I sent her a photo of it. Freshly painted, manicured lawn, a bright red for sale sign out front with a big sold sticker slapped across it. No caption, just the image. It took 5 minutes before my phone rang. I didn't answer. The thing about silence is it stretches. It doesn't snap like you'd think. It stretches and stretches until one day, it wraps itself around your throat and you can't breathe. That's what those next few weeks felt like. A slow suffocation. Emily didn't call again. Not after the house photo. I guess she didn't know what to say, and I didn't feel like giving her a script. I settled into the new house with a sort of reverence, like it was a church and I was its lone worshiper. I painted the kitchen cabinets blue, the exact shade I remembered from my grandmother's apron. I bought a swing for the porch, planted tomatoes and marigolds, and put a rocker by the window where the morning light hit just right. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up dreading the day. But of course, peace doesn't last forever, especially in families like mine. It started with a phone call from Martin, Emily's husband. He had a voice like a blade, smooth and sharp. He always talked to me like I was a secretary he'd rather fire but couldn't legally dismiss. "We were hoping you'd reconsider your little stunt," he said, not bothering to sugarcoat it. It's put Emily in a difficult position. I was sipping tea on my porch, the marsh air sweet with jasmine. I didn't know my purchase was a stunt. He sighed, like I was a child refusing to apologize. "She's upset. She feels you're trying to undermine her." I didn't know owning a home was an act of aggression. You know what I mean? No, I didn't. Or maybe I did, and I was just done playing along. I ended the call with a polite, "Tell Emily I hope she's well," and didn't answer the next dozen. Instead, I drove to a lawyer's office in Charleston. Not because I needed anything, just because I wanted to understand a few things. You see, years ago, when Emily was 10 and her father left us, he didn't just leave me with a mortgage and an old Buick. He left behind a mess of paperwork. There was a will, an old one, and I never looked too hard at it because I was too busy surviving. But now, with my new life quiet and still, I had time. The lawyer, kind eyes, hands like my father's, read through it, lips moving silently as he skimmed. Then he looked up. "Did you know you're listed as the sole beneficiary of a trust fund tied to Emily's father's first business investment?" I blinked. "Trust fund? What trust fund?" He explained. Her father had started a company, something small, early tech. And when he cashed out years later, before he skipped town, he tucked a percentage of his payout into a trust in my name. For Emily's future, it said. But here's the thing, it wasn't in Emily's name. It was in mine, and it was untouched, grown over decades, a neat little fortune hiding in plain sight. I drove home in silence, that word again, silence, and sat on my porch with the papers in my lap. Emily had always believed her father did nothing for us, and in a way she was right. He didn't raise her, didn't call, didn't show up. But this changed things. She didn't know, and when she found out, and she would, she'd assume I kept it from her, that I hoarded it out of spite. But the truth? I didn't even know it existed. And now I had to decide what to do with it. That night, I lit a candle and wrote a letter. To Emily. To myself. To no one, really. I wrote about the years I gave up. The dreams I buried. The nights I cried into a dish towel because the rent was due and I didn't have enough. I wrote about her birthday parties, about sewing her Halloween costumes, about the time she got her heart broken, and I stayed up all night holding her hand. And then I wrote something else. I wrote a will. Because I realized that while Emily and Martin saw me as a relic, a burden, a woman with nothing to offer, I had more power than they imagined. I had silence. I had truth. I had the right to decide what story would be told after I was gone. And if they wanted to make me the villain, well, I decided I'd play the part. But I'd do it my way, with grace, and a pen. The morning after I signed the first draft of my will, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee and watched the sunrise from the back porch. The marsh shimmered like old glass, soft and golden. It was a kind of peace I hadn't known in years, a peace I built myself. And yet, deep down, I knew it couldn't last. Peace never does when your name still lives in other people's mouths like a bitter seed. I thought about Emily, about how a daughter becomes a stranger not all at once, but in layers. Little shifts in tone. One missed phone call, then another, until suddenly you're standing on her porch covered in soot, and she doesn't even flinch. 2 days later, a letter arrived. Not a card, not a phone call, a typed and signed letter on heavy paper. Martin's doing, no doubt. We believe it would be in everyone's best interest to have a family discussion regarding your recent decisions. Emily is particularly distressed and confused by your actions. Please consider meeting us for dinner this Friday at Aurelia's. We can sort this out like a family. Like a family. I read that line over and over until the words stopped making sense. I didn't want to go. Every part of me screamed, don't go. But part of me, a small, tired, curious part, wanted to look them in the eye and see if there was anything left of the daughter I used to tuck in at night. Aurelia's was one of those upscale, dimly lit restaurants where everything costs too much and tastes like less. I wore my best blouse, the one with the mother of pearl buttons Emily had once said made me look quaint. I sat down first. The hostess looked at me like I'd wandered in by mistake. Emily and Martin arrived 10 minutes late. Of course, she was wearing cream. She always wore neutrals now. Her hair slicked back. No sign of the little girl who used to beg me for pigtails. Martin looked like he smelled of mint and ego. We exchanged pleasantries, so strained they might as well have been threats. The waiter came. We ordered. No one touched the bread. And then Martin started. This entire situation has gotten unnecessarily complicated. I didn't reply. Emily leaned forward. Mom, we just want to understand what's going on. You didn't answer my calls. You bought a house you can't possibly maintain. You're behaving irrationally. Irrationally, I said slowly. For taking care of myself? You know what we mean, she snapped. The house, the silence, that photo, what was that supposed to be? Some message. I smiled small and still. You closed a door in my face, Emily. I sent a picture of the door I opened for myself. Her cheeks colored. Martin jumped in. We're not here to fight. We just think it's important to discuss the trust. Ah, there it was. The truth behind the dinner. The trust her father had left in my name. The one they'd just discovered, clearly. Probably found it through a financial search. Or maybe one of Martin's friends in estate law tipped him off. Emily looked shocked when I mentioned I'd only just learned of it myself. I don't believe you, she said quietly, eyes gleaming. You always said he left us with nothing. He did, I said. Except one thing. And he put it in my name. That was for me, she whispered, the words trembling. No, I said. It was for your future. But he didn't trust you to understand what that meant. Neither did I, it seems. The air at the table turned ice cold. Martin tried to pivot. We're not asking for much. Just some oversight. Some transparency. We can handle the accounts. I'll manage my affairs, I cut in. And I've already made arrangements. You'll be taken care of, but not in the way you expect. Emily's mouth opened, then closed. The girl who used to write me thank you notes in crayon had no words. I'm not angry, I added. I'm not even sad anymore. But I am awake. And awake women don't hand over their futures out of guilt. I folded my napkin, stood, and placed a 20 on the table. They didn't move. As I left the restaurant, I felt something settle inside me. Not bitterness, not victory, just clarity. The kind that comes after fire, after ashes, after a door closes. And from that moment forward, I knew this story, my story, would end on my terms. After the dinner at Aurelia's, I expected some kind of follow-up. A letter, a call, even a knock at the door. But nothing came. Not from Emily, not from Martin. Just silence, brittle and complete. And for the first time, I welcomed it. In that quiet, I started rebuilding, not just a house, not just a life, but a sense of self I hadn't felt in years. I found myself waking before dawn, not out of obligation, but choice. I'd walk the grounds barefoot, dew soaking my socks, coffee steaming in my mug. Sometimes I'd talk to myself out loud, narrating the chores the way I used to when Emily was little. But this time, no one rolled their eyes. Still, the past is like mold in an old house. You can paint over it, but it always finds its way through. It came one morning in the form of an old manila envelope, wedged between junk mail and a hardware store flyer. It had no return address, just my name, written in that pinched, familiar script I hadn't seen since the early 2000s. It was from Emily's father. Inside, a letter, yellowed with age, dated July 1999. Maggie, if you're reading this, I probably didn't do right by you, and I'm sorry. I wasn't brave enough to stay, but I did one thing. I set something aside. I couldn't say it then, but it was for you. For everything you gave up. I hope it finds you when you need it most. There was more. Old bank statements. A copy of a trust agreement. A photo, us sitting on the porch of that first house. Emily on your lap, her curls wild in the wind. I sat at the kitchen table for hours after that, just staring at the photo. The past wasn't clean. It wasn't kind, but it had moments, brief flashes where it had felt almost beautiful. That night, I lit a fire in the backyard pit and burned the envelope, the copy of the trust, even the photo. Not out of anger, but because I didn't need proof anymore. I had the truth, and more importantly, I had the future. A week later, I met with my lawyer again. We finalized everything. The will, the trust's reallocation, the conditions. I wasn't writing a revenge letter. I was composing a legacy, and that legacy wasn't going to reward cruelty, silence, or entitlement. Emily would get something, yes, but not the house, not the trust. She'd receive a modest inheritance, tied to very clear stipulations. The rest? It would go to 2 scholarships, one for single mothers returning to school, and one for girls in foster care with dreams too big for the rooms they sleep in. The house? I'd already arranged for that to become a women's retreat, a place for those rebuilding from ashes like I had, a place with rocking chairs and wild marigolds and good coffee at dawn. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't need to. And yet, just as the ink dried on those documents, the phone rang. Emily. I let it ring twice before I picked up. Mom, she said, her voice a little softer than I remembered. I've been thinking about the dinner. Have you? There was a pause. I didn't mean to sound ungrateful. I was just surprised. Hurt, maybe. I almost laughed. Hurt. That's what she said when I'd been locked out of her house, told I ruined her aesthetic, treated like a ghost who should stay politely out of frame. I understand, I said quietly. Surprise can do that. Can we talk? In person. I thought about the old Emily, the one who clutched my hand at the doctor's office, the one who cried when her goldfish died and asked if I believed in heaven. Of course, I said. Come by Friday. I didn't tell her that Friday was the day the retreat's new sign would go up, that the lawyer would be stopping by for a final review. I didn't tell her that I'd already said goodbye to the part of me that used to need her love more than my own dignity. I just said, come. And in that moment, I felt something unfamiliar. Power. Not the loud, brash kind, but the quiet, grounded kind. The kind women like me are told we're too old to claim. Friday arrived with a sky so blue it almost felt like mockery. The air was sweet with the scent of honeysuckle, and the marsh behind the house shimmered under the morning sun. I made myself a cup of tea, not the bitter kind I'd drunk out of necessity for years, but the lavender blend Velma had brought me 2 weeks ago. I sat on the porch, waiting. At 10:03, Emily's car pulled up. Same pearl-colored SUV, spotless as ever. She stepped out in neutral tones, oversized sunglasses, and hair pulled tight like a statement. But she looked different. Thinner maybe, tired around the eyes. She hesitated before walking up the steps. I didn't stand to greet her. I just sipped my tea and gestured toward the chair across from me. "Mom," she said. "Emily." We sat in silence for a moment, the way two people do when too much has happened between them and nothing they say can fix it. "I didn't know about the trust," she started. "Not until Martin found a filing from one of Dad's old partnerships." I nodded. "Neither did I. Until recently." She looked down at her hands. "No rings today. No polish. I guess I've been unfair," she said. "About a lot." I raised an eyebrow. She pressed her lips together. "It's just, I'd built a life, a certain kind of life, and I didn't know how to fit you into it anymore." I let the words hang in the air. I wanted to see if she'd hear herself, if she'd realize what she was saying. When she looked back up, I said, "I never asked to fit into your life, Emily. I gave you mine. That was the deal I didn't know I was signing. But now I've found something I can call mine again." "I'm sorry," she said, and for once, it sounded like she meant it. I nodded. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But acknowledgement. Just then, the sound of tires crunching on gravel drew both our heads around. A small white truck pulled up. My lawyer, Mrs. Donnelly, stepped out, bright scarf, practical shoes, a leather folio tucked under her arm. Emily stiffened. "What's she doing here?" "I told you I had plans today," I said calmly. Donnelly walked over with a polite nod. "Ms. Walker, are you ready to finalize everything?" Emily looked between us. "Finalize what?" "The transfer," Donnelly said before I could stop her. "Of the house, to the Retreat Foundation." Emily's face went pale. "What Retreat Foundation?" "It's called Ash and Bloom," I said softly. "For women starting over. Like I did. Like so many others have to." Her mouth opened, but no sound came. "The trust," she whispered. "You're giving that away too?" "Not all of it," I said. "You'll receive a portion. Enough to honor what's left between us. But the rest, well, the rest is going to make sure that women like me don't have to beg to sit on a beige couch and be told they're ruining someone's aesthetic." Her cheeks flushed. "Mom, you're punishing me." "No," I said, standing. "I'm remembering me." She looked like she wanted to argue, maybe to cry. But instead, she stood too, adjusted her purse, straightened her spine. "Does Martin know?" I smiled. "Martin doesn't get a say." And with that, Emily nodded once, sharp, clipped, and turned toward her car. She didn't slam the door. She didn't yell. She just drove away. And for the first time since the fire, I felt light. Donnelly and I signed the papers right there on the porch. She left shortly after, leaving me with the keys to a house that now had a new name, a new purpose, and a new future. Later that afternoon, I stood at the edge of the marsh, my bare feet sinking into the warm mud. I breathed in deep, held it, and then let it all go. I wasn't a villain. I was the author now, and I had just written the most important chapter of my life. The sign went up the following Monday. Ash and Bloom. Black letters on whitewashed wood, hanging from a wrought iron bracket beside the front gate. I stood in the driveway watching the workers secure it in place, my hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea. They asked if I wanted to pose for a photo. I declined. Some moments are too private for publicity. The name had come to me in a dream. Simple, quiet, strong. Like the women I was building this place for. Women like me, who'd lost their footing, their homes, their families, or themselves, and needed somewhere safe to land. A place to start again. A place where silence wasn't a punishment, but a choice. I didn't want pity here. I wanted power. That afternoon, Velma stopped by. She pulled up in her ancient sedan, the one that wheezed more than purred, and stepped out wearing a sun hat and carrying a pie tin like it was sacred cargo. "I made you pecan," she said. "Figured you might need something sweet today." I hugged her, real and tight, and we sat on the porch eating pie straight from the tin with plastic forks. "I heard about the sign," she said. "Some of the ladies from church have been asking what you're up to." "I'm opening a sanctuary." Velma raised an eyebrow. "For lost souls." "For found ones," I said. She smiled then, real slow. "Took you long enough." We didn't talk about Emily. Not at first. But Velma never let silence last too long. "You think she'll come back?" she asked finally. I don't know, I said. And for once, I'm not waiting to find out. Velma patted my hand. That's the best kind of peace. Over the next few weeks, the transformation began. We stripped wallpaper, painted walls, replaced the musty carpets with warm wood floors. I hired a carpenter to build custom bookshelves, a gardener to revive the yard, and a local artist to paint a mural in the common room. Wildflowers and women with fire in their eyes. Each room was named after someone who'd survived something. I named the library Elaine, after my sister, who raised 3 kids on minimum wage and buried 2 husbands without ever asking for help. The kitchen became Ruth, after my grandmother, who never let anyone leave her table hungry or unblessed. People started calling. Local shelters, churches, caseworkers. I told them we'd open officially in spring, but the first bed was ready by November. Her name was Tanya, 42, divorced, 2 boys in foster care, and a face that had forgotten how to hope. She showed up with 1 suitcase and a scar on her left cheek. She didn't explain. I didn't ask. I just showed her to the room called Maggie. It had blue curtains, a view of the marsh, and a quilt I'd sewn myself during the sleepless nights after the fire. This is yours, I said. She cried. Not loudly, just enough to remind me why I was doing this. Later that night, as I walked the halls with a mug of warm milk, I stopped at the door to the Elaine library. Tanya was inside, curled up in an armchair, reading under the soft glow of a lamp. I smiled, closed the door quietly, and stood in the hallway for a moment, letting the quiet settle. This wasn't revenge. It was resurrection. And it was just beginning. The air shifted the day the second guest arrived. Her name was Janine, 59, recently widowed. Her voice was so soft I had to lean in just to catch her name. She walked like she expected the floor to fall out from under her. She came with nothing but a canvas bag and a quiet that felt too familiar. I led her to the Ruth room. She didn't ask questions, just nodded and touched the windowsill like she was trying to remember how to exist in a place that didn't demand her disappearance. Later, I found her in the kitchen, hands trembling as she tried to open a jar of preserves. She looked at me like she might shatter if I offered help. So I didn't. I just walked past, took another jar from the shelf, and popped the lid off mine without a word. That was how it was at Ash and Bloom. No one here needed fixing. We just needed space to remember we were whole. By the end of the week, Janine was baking bread every morning. Tanya took over the garden. I started hosting tea on Sundays. Nothing formal, just whoever wanted to sit on the porch and talk or not talk. Velma came by with muffins. A woman from church donated a box of board games. A retired teacher offered free tutoring for residents studying for their GEDs. It felt like a life. A new one that breathed on its own. And then the letter came. Handwritten. No return address. Just my name on the envelope in a shaky script. I opened it in the kitchen, my fingers steady, but my heart thudding. Dear Mom, I don't know where to start, so I'll start with the truth. I was cruel. I know that. I was trying to build a life that looked right, and I forgot how to make one that felt right. I wanted to be someone people admired, and somewhere along the way, I stopped admiring you. I didn't understand what it took. I didn't see how hard you were still working to be in my life. I just saw your presence as weight, not the anchor it was. I'm ashamed of that. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve your time. But if there's a place in this new life you're building, I'd like to visit. I'd like to learn from you. Love, Emily. I read it 3 times, each word landing like a raindrop. Unexpected and soft, but not enough to drown me. I didn't write back. Not right away. Instead, I went outside and sat under the sycamore tree. The one Tanya had trimmed, Janine had hung wind chimes in, and I'd planted wild mint beneath. The sun was setting, pink and gold like it knew something I didn't. I held the letter in my lap and whispered, "We'll see." Because I wasn't sure if I had room in this life for her just yet. But I wasn't sure I didn't either. Emily arrived on a rainy Thursday. She didn't call first, just showed up, hair soaked at the edges, jacket clinging to her like she wasn't used to walking through weather. I was in the parlor, folding a fresh set of linens for the new room we'd opened, Maxine, after a professor who once told me, Don't let them bury you before you're dead. I saw her through the front window first, standing there, unsure whether to knock or turn away. I didn't move. I wanted to see what she'd choose. After a moment, she reached for the door. Janine answered it. I heard the exchange from down the hall, Janine's calm, no-nonsense voice. Can I help you? I'm looking for Maggie Walker. She's my mother. Janine didn't respond right away. Then she's in the parlor. If she wants to see you, she'll come out. I smiled at that. Small. Proud. I waited another minute before stepping into the doorway. Emily turned, her eyes already red, rain mixing with what might have been tears. Hi, Mom. She didn't call me Maggie. Not this time. Come in, I said. We sat at the edge of the parlor, me in the high-backed armchair, her on the bench by the window. She looked around, taking it in. The soft wallpaper, the shelves lined with paperbacks, the photos of past residents, not of their pain, but their triumphs. A ribbon ceremony, a cake for someone's new job, a diploma framed in wood. This place, she started. It's not a house, I said. It's a beginning. She nodded. I read the newsletter. I didn't know about any of it. You didn't ask. She bit her lip. I didn't think I had to. I thought I knew everything. That was the problem. We didn't speak for a while. Just listened to the rain tapping against the windows. Finally, she said, I came because I wanted to apologize, but also because I wanted to see it with my own eyes. What you built. What I missed. I stood and walked to the mantel, picked up a framed photo of Emily as a child, pigtailed, gap-toothed, holding up a drawing she'd made of me. I never stopped loving you, I said, but I stopped waiting for you to love me back the same way. She looked down. I want to earn a place in your life again, she whispered. I know, I said, and I want to believe you mean it. I walked over and handed her the photo. This is where we start. Not with guilt, with truth. She held the picture tight, like it was more fragile than it looked. I don't know how to do this, she said. I smiled soft and sad. Neither did I, but I did it anyway, and that was enough for now. It took time. Emily didn't become a regular fixture overnight. She didn't move in, she didn't try to take over. Thank God, but she started showing up. First, it was small things. A batch of lemon bars left on the porch. A potted succulent with a note that said, for your windowsill. She joined us for Sunday tea once, sat next to Velma, laughed at Janine's crossword addiction, and even asked Tanya about the garden. She was awkward, hesitant, like a woman tiptoeing across a frozen pond, unsure how thick the ice was. And I let her. I didn't rush her, didn't scold or scold myself for not hugging her when she arrived. I had finally stopped earning love through sacrifice. I had nothing left to prove. One afternoon, she asked if she could shadow me, just to see what your day looks like. So I let her. We made breakfast together in the Ruth kitchen. She peeled potatoes wrong, but we laughed about it. We organized the donated clothes closet. She helped me hang new curtains in the Maya room, a space reserved for women escaping long-term domestic violence. At the end of the day, as we sat on the porch drinking peppermint tea, she looked out across the marsh and said, I didn't know you were capable of all this. I didn't say anything. I just looked at her. She turned. That's not what I meant. I mean, I didn't know because I never asked. I know. I thought your life was small, she said, almost to herself. But it was only small because I was looking at it through the wrong end of a telescope. I sipped my tea. It wasn't small, I said. It was hidden, because I was taught that's what mothers do. Tuck themselves away so their children shine brighter. We sat with that. Then she asked if she could help with the newsletter. Said her firm was downsizing and she had more time. I told her you can help, but you don't get to rename anything. She laughed, really laughed, and something shifted in her face. The child I once knew peeked through the woman I didn't. A week later, a package arrived addressed to Ash and Bloom. Inside, 6 hand-bound journals, a set of monogram pens, and a note that read, for the story still waiting to be told. They were from Emily. I placed one journal in each room. On the inside cover of each, I wrote the same thing. You are not a burden. You are a book still being written. Take your time. Write boldly. Spring didn't so much arrive as it unfurled, slow and deliberate, like it wanted to be sure it was welcome. The marsh behind the house turned a deeper green, thick with reeds and promise. Cardinals sang at sunrise. The jasmine by the porch bloomed again, tiny white stars filling the air with sweetness so thick you could almost taste it. Inside ash and bloom, the air carried the scent of lemon oil, fresh bread, and lavender sachets tucked into every room. The floors creaked less now, not because they'd been fixed, but because we'd grown used to their rhythm. Like a heartbeat. By then, we'd had 9 women pass through our doors, each with her own history, her own heartbreak, her own way of filling a room. Tanya had started leading a Sunday planting circle in the garden. Tomatoes, herbs, hope. Janine had become our unofficial house baker. And every morning, without fail, I found a slice of banana bread or warm biscuits wrapped in foil waiting for me on the kitchen counter. Even Emily had found a way to belong, though it hadn't been easy. She came by twice a week now. Sometimes she helped organize donations. Other times, she just sat in the Elaine room and read the journals, those spiral-bound notebooks I'd placed in each guest room with the inscription, "You are not a burden. You are a book still being written. Take your time. Write boldly." One afternoon, I found her tracing the edge of a page someone had filled with shaky handwriting. Today, I made it till noon before crying. That's an hour longer than yesterday. I think that's progress. Emily didn't speak. She just nodded once, handed me the journal, and stepped outside. We were learning how to be near each other again, not as mother and daughter bound by guilt and old wounds, but as women trying. That evening, I sat alone in my room. The lamp cast a warm circle on the floor, and outside, the frogs had started their nightly chorus. I opened my journal, the one I kept hidden in the drawer beneath the photo of Emily as a little girl, and began to write. I wrote about the fire, about the motel, about the way Velma had looked at me and said, "You forgot how to throw a punch." I wrote about the house, about planting marigolds by the front steps because Emily used to call them sunflowers when she was 3. And then I wrote about the will, because I never changed it, not even after Emily's apology or the first time she left a thank you note by the coffee pot. I thought about it more than once. I stared at the folder on my desk, hand hovering, thinking maybe now. But I didn't, because the will was never about punishing her. It was about honoring myself. For every year I stayed silent. For every birthday party I planned without a thank you. For every night I cried into a dish towel because my daughter looked through me like I was part of the wallpaper. I'd already made peace with my choices. And in that peace, I found clarity. Emily would receive enough. A trust to care for her in times of need. A note explaining that love, real love, doesn't always come wrapped in what you expect, but it does come when it matters. The rest, the bulk of the estate, the property, the restructured trust her father had left behind, I had already transferred to Ash and Bloom. It would fund new beds, pay stipends for residents starting over, cover tuition for those going back to school. It would grow, because women grow when they're given soil and light. And for too long, we've been kept in the dark. That weekend, Emily brought me a breakfast tray, toast, grapefruit, a hot cup of tea, and a pale yellow envelope. No fanfare, just a quiet, vulnerable offering. Inside was a card, handwritten. "Thank you for not giving up on me. I know now that love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. I'm still learning how to love you the right way. But I'm here. If you'll still have me." I folded the card slowly, pressed it to my chest. Then I opened the front door and stepped out barefoot onto the porch. The wood was warm from the morning sun. A breeze rolled off the marsh, lifting the hem of my nightgown. I closed my eyes. The house hummed behind me. Laughter from the kitchen, a chair scraping across the floor, someone playing Nina Simone on the little radio in the hall. This wasn't the ending I'd imagined all those months ago. Standing on Emily's porch with soot in my hair and a suitcase full of loss. This was something better. Something mine. I smiled, not because it was over, but because I'd finally written the story myself. And this time, I didn't need anyone's permission.